Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 330 of the Mind Body Musings podcast. We are delighted today to be welcoming a guest who I have been keeping in my heart and my mind and my spirit, wanting to bring on to the podcast. And here we are today with Mirabai Starr, author of Wild Mercy. Oh my goodness. She is an award winning author of creative nonfiction and contemporary translations of sacred literature. She taught philosophy and world religions at the University of New Mexico Taos for 20 years and now teaches and speaks internationally on contemplative practice and inner spiritual dialogue. So fun to read words and then you're like, do I know this word? A certified bereavement counselor, Mirabai helps mourners harness the transformational power of loss. Her latest book is Wild Mercy, Living the Fierce and Tender Wisdom of the Women Mystics, and she lives with her extended family in the mountains of northern New Mexico. Welcome to the Mind Body Musings podcast, Mirabai.
Thank you, Madeline. I'm really honored that you invited me.
Thank you. So your book, I bought it. I was on Amazon. I was like looking for the link for it to start sharing it out. And it was like, you bought this of July of 2020. And I know someone else who had read this and posted it on their Instagram. And I saw it and I was like, something about even before hearing her thoughts on the book or reading the book cover, I just saw Wild Mercy. And I was like, ooh, I feel very pulled. I don't know why, but my fingers are reaching towards the cart on Amazon and we are ordering this now. And I didn't even read anything about it until it arrived in my hands. And when I got this book, I was going through last year I was living on an ayahuasca property and I was doing a lot of that around a lot of mother wound work. And in all my journeys I felt a lot of feminine energy coming in and holding me, and I was really tending to the garden of my feminine and mother wounds, just my relationship with mother, and nurturing and compassion and tender energy. And I got this book during that time, and for whatever reason, I wasn't ready to read it yet, but it was on my nightstand for months, like just sitting right next to me as I was doing these journeys. And I was going through a very intense relationship. And then I ended up leaving the relationship, leaving the temple. And then that's when I read the book. I drove from New York all the way to LA. I passed through New Mexico where you live. And I was reading this during that time, during my travels across the country. And oh my God, I was just like, I think I was crying in the first chapter. And I don't do that from books often, but even in your first chapter in your prose, the prose that you wrote, um, it brought me to tears, and I was like, this woman is man, she is something else. She is an alchemist of many different sorts. And so I have been just like, this book is, it just keeps finding its way to different tables in my apartment. Even though I've already read it, it just keeps like, I'll pick it up and I'll take it with me to the kitchen, and it'll just like, it's amazing. It's like a feminine Bible, honestly. Like, it's just the Bible of feminine beings, and like your specific transmission of these stories. The stories are amazing, but the way that you write that can tend to the sensory experience, like I feel it in my body, the wisdom from these women. It doesn't feel like they are disconnected from me in just stories. Like, it's like, oh, I feel the presence of these mystics in my body all of a sudden because of your words. So all of that to say, I love this book.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful description.
Yeah.
It felt
So
like a transmission. That's a good word.
mm,
Transmission's a good word because that's what it felt like in my body as it was coming through.
since we're already on here on this topic, I would love to know from you what it was like to write this book and how you protected the process, because I'm a writer and I notice that sometimes when I read other things, I start to write like that author.
Mm.
So I've been trying to learn how to protect my own writing style when I'm working on books. And I'm curious for you, did you have to have any kind of container where you didn't read certain other authors or you didn't even read other books as you wrote this and you just focused on this, or if there's anything unique around that process?
Oh, what an interesting question, Madeline. No, I don't protect myself from other writers' voices. I guess I feel like my voice has always been a big part of my creative experience, like from young, early childhood. I had the great good fortune of going to alternative schools in the 1970s, when the emphasis on this kind of education was the arts and children finding themselves and expressing the whole person. And so I think that the adults around me always safeguarded our unique styles, whether it was in the visual arts or um, writing. In my case, it was always writing poetry and somewhat visual arts too, and dance, but and music, all of them. But yeah, so I've never worried about that. In fact, maybe that's part of my whole understanding of the fierce feminine, is that there's only one of us. And it's
Mm.
not about women and men necessarily, although it does tend to shake out that way. But it's that my voice is part of everybody's voice, and everybody's voice is part of my. So I have nothing to protect. I have nothing to
Mm.
protect, because I
Mm.
feel like we're all in this together, and I'm pretty sure that my particular flavor is the one that was given to me, and I can rest in that. Yeah,
Mm.
I
Ah,
love reading women's memoirs. I love
mm.
reading women's memoirs. That's what I read to refill my own cup.
Do you have a couple favorites to recommend?
Let's see. I've always loved, one of my top favorites has always been In the Body of the World by Eve Ensler. That's
Mm.
definitely up there at the very tip top. And I love everything Anne Lamott writes. Anne Lamott's short personal essays, Traveling Mercies, and others. She's also my
Ah,
favorite writer of book about writing, Bird by Bird. It's a wonderful book about writing that I think maybe addresses that. So Anne Lamott, yeah, she is amazing.
okay. If you like it, I'm gonna like it. I'm getting
I think
those.
you will. She's very funny too, which I really appreciate.
Oh,
The power of humor. I
mm,
mean, I feel like you have that too, Madeline. You're not like a stand-up comic, but you're irreverent in the most reverent way. And I
mm.
think that I love that. I get so tired of self-important spiritual people.
Yes. Oh, it feels so good. So nice to hear you say that. It feels so good to hear you say. Yes, and thank you. I really appreciate that. That feels really good. Okay, so a standard question that I ask my guests, and I would love to hear what's going on in your world right now, is what are you musing on? This is mind body musing. So in
Hmm.
life, what's really captivated your fancy? What's tickling your
Mm.
fancy?
Oh, that's good. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is I'm writing a new book, and it's about my mother. It's a memoir about my mother through
Mm.
my eyes, but it's what's making me so happy about it. Well, two things. One is my mom's 85, and she's in good health, but we're not able to see each other because of COVID. But we're talking on the phone a lot, and we have had some socially distanced visits in which I am recording her. I'm asking her questions and recording her. And so, no matter what happens with the book, because only a fraction of that gets into the book, these times with my mom and getting her stories, because she was, an early feminist and early hippie and
Mm.
artist and political activist, peace activist. All these stories are precious, and being with her has been such a gift. So that is really on my heart as the thing that's moving me. But what I'm really thinking about that is not making me happy, but that I really know I need to be thinking about, since you asked, is that everything that I've built my career on and that I've believed my whole life, which is about the interconnected wisdom of all the world's spiritual traditions, what some people call interspirituality, is is rooted in white privilege. Like, I am
Ah.
really realizing that my entire life's work is a product of my white privilege.
Hmm.
So I have always encouraged people to do as I did in that alternative, counterculture upbringing that I had, which was white privilege in itself, even though we lived in poverty. We were off the grid, we were homesteading, we were living communally. We had nothing, but it was a choice. My middle class parents chose to live that way. And all the other white middle class people in northern New Mexico, going back to the land, chose to live that way. That was
Hmm.
a choice. And so I grew up drawing on all the wisdom streams of the world's great spiritual traditions. And and so and I've taught that, and I've written books about that, and I have made money
Hmm.
with that message. That's my thing. And I am now, during the last few years, but especially since COVID and this more internal time, I'm really questioning that. And because I am a public figure, I'm publicly questioning that, questioning my
Hmm.
own privilege, and inviting other, especially white people in white spiritual spaces, to consider, cultural appropriation when we're doing the things that we do, whether it's working with the chakras, or smudging sage to purify a space, or learning a Sufi zikr, a chant, and all of the things that we do that make us, so many of us, feel so alive and so connected and feel respectful. But I'm asking us to check our privilege
Hmm.
in that, and starting, of course, with myself. So that's what's up for me.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much.
Um,
Yeah, the with this train of thought, you said that the Sufi zikr, is that what it is?
yeah,
Sufi zikr. So what is it around? So if we are going to be learning about these different traditions, and we're white folks,
yeah,
and um, I'm intrigued by this because I've had an experience even yesterday. I have a friend who is Muslim, and I bought this book. It's called something about divine love, and it's about I mean, maybe you've even read it, but it's about how you can find God and deeper love through Islam. And I've been really interested in this. For the first time in my life, I've been
mhm,
interested in learning more about Islam. And something about it I'm not going into a white privilege guilt, like, oh, I'm being this girl who's getting this book is this terrible, because I realize that's a way that I could get attention, as being like, is this bad that I'm reading this book, and I don't want to do that. But I have been, even holding that book, I felt something that was like, what about this experience right now is privilege that I want to be aware of, and I don't have
mhm,
the vocabulary for it, or even the neural connections like this, because I'm just diving into this as well. So I'm curious on what is that, I don't know if the word is fine line, but how, as white people, especially white women, and in our life coaching world, and our Instagram stories talking about our new spiritual practices, how do we hold the traditions with the utmost respect,
right.
and have curiosity, but do it in a way that you see, where are we going, like, where are we going
Mhm.
as observers of these traditions, especially if we have an interest in learning a prayer, or having a tradition. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, totally. And I
Okay.
love to respond. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
great question, and an important one. Thank you for asking it. With me, we're asking this question
Yeah.
together. So one way is to enter into that practice, not even so much as an observer, but be willing to come undone, be
Mm.
willing to not know, and be willing to be transformed by the encounter.
Mm.
so that we're not just observing like we're window shopping. We're actually allowing ourselves to be vulnerable enough to be changed by that experience, whether it's a prayer or another kind of spiritual practice, a chant. So that's one thing, is to be vulnerable and be willing to not know, um, to be willing to be changed.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean converted. I mean, except for a conversion of the heart. It means being willing, yeah, to have our whatever our belief systems may be dismantled in the fire of the love that we've come into proximity with.
Mm.
That's one thing. Another is, of course, to do it with respect, and you are. I can see that you are, even with that book. Like, here I am. Name it to yourself, or if you're doing it publicly, as I so often am, and you probably are too, to just say, this is a beautiful book that I've come across, that it comes from a tradition that I was not familiar with before this, and it's been such a powerful experience for me, and this is why, and to name that it comes from this other culture. That's a bow, it's like
Mm.
bowing to it. And then I guess the third thing I would say is that if you are going to make money as a white person from your harvesting this fruit from another cultural tradition, that you also name that
Mm.
with respect. I received this teaching from,
Yeah.
the Taos Pueblo people, and with the deepest gratitude and respect, I want to share it with you.
Mm.
So I think naming and being honest about it, rather than, I just discovered about this 5,000-year-old Vedantic tradition about chakras, and I'm now an expert, and I'm going to charge, a lot of money for you to come to my little thing and learn about my very superficial understanding of this ancient wisdom tradition. So to be
Yeah.
careful with how we as white people make money, literally financially benefit from other people's treasures.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't mean we
Yeah.
can't incorporate them in, but to do so by naming it, respecting it, and coming with that humility and vulnerability.
That was a beautiful answer. Thank
Okay,
you. I
thanks.
love.
Long-winded.
Oh, yeah, that was beautiful. And this, you gave three different things, and it's I mean, this can be an uncomfortable topic, and I love that we're having it right now, spontaneously, because it, I know that I have my own so much white privilege, and I know that that comes through in different ways, and it's really beautiful to be able to look at the things that we're doing, that like we love talking about religion and spirituality, and where does it begin to lose the respect for the originations of it. One of the things that comes up for me is that oh man, some people who follow me may not be happy to hear this, because I'm sure many people are Reiki masters, but I think there is a big lack of, like, just a big problem with the way that Reiki master is handed out from going to a 3-hour workshop and you get a
Mm,
certificate. And that's one of those things that I've seen has been commodified, and I haven't done a workshop like that, but it's never felt good in my body when I hear the
mhm,
word master.
mm,
And I know people have gone to these workshops, and it's a lot of times it is a 3-hour thing where you sometimes just talk about astrology, and then you leave as a master, and then your people's bodies are now going to be in your hands, and it's just an interesting thing that I definitely see a lot of that kind of um, Western society privilege as a whole with
mhm.
that.
Yeah, good example.
Hmm. Okay, so speaking about religion, your book, Wild Mercy, is full of gorgeous tradition, so much tradition and so much ritual. And I've noticed something in my own life. I was raised very, very Baptist,
Mm,
Christian, conservative, but not just like Christian Baptist conservative. There was a lot of abuse in my household. So where one starts and where the other stops is something I've been pulling apart, and therapy and my work is like really trying to understand. And I went to Israel 2 years ago, and I did some deep like Jesus healing work. And
Mm.
then this year has been a major year for Mary Magdalene work. And I've realized how she is like just an archetype and energy, a woman that I very much want to embody as being devotional.
Mm.
Her service is just stunning to me. And so I've done a lot of healing around the Christianity, but if I'm being very honest, I've noticed this year that I'm starting to desire more uh, specificity in who I'm worshiping. I want to
Mm.
worship, and I want to worship deeply, and I want to have tradition and ritual. And it's a weird place to be. Like, I love that you talk about inner spirituality. Is that what you call inner
Mhm.
spirituality? It's like
Mm.
it's working with the energy of all spirit as a whole, it feels like. But what happens if you're someone who wants it feels so funny saying this, but like I want religion again. Like
Mhm.
I want to know, I want specificity. Who am I worshiping, and
Mm.
what is my practice, and what is my prayer?
Mm.
And I'm in a place right now where I'm feeling a little lost. And I love your book because it combines so much and it's so nourishing to my heart. But I'm curious, what kind of what kind of insight or advice would you give someone who is
Mm.
actually hungry for a set path, at least ish, not any
Yeah,
of the dogma, but
right.
ish, a set path? Where would you recommend they start? Where do
Oh,
they
that's a
go?
wonderful question. Yes, a more specific spiritual tradition minus the dogma and fundamentalism. Yeah,
Right.
that's really valid. I think that people have different temperaments. This is in Hinduism, it says that we all have these sort of different temperaments. So the different yogas are appropriate for different people. Like karma yoga would be more for the more active, service-oriented people, and bhakti yoga would be more for the
Mm,
devotional, emotional people, and so on. But also there are different stages of our lives, I think, when we're as you are hungry for different things and our souls are asking for those things if we can only listen as you seem to be, for instance. um and I also think that some people are temperamentally inclined to draw on many different spiritual traditions. I think that's me. i
mm,
i have a hard time with specificity. It makes me feel trapped, and it makes me feel like the vastness, the vast mystery is being bottled up, and so it's hard for me to pick one. And yet I have gone deeply into multiple different spiritual traditions, and I think that to find one that resonates with you, like the fact that you're drawn to Mary Magdalene right now, for instance, you, Madeline. I mean, I know people listening are also going, "Yeah, me too." I'm wondering what that thing is that I can give myself to at this point in my life. I would follow that Mary
mm,
Magdalene prompt in your soul and see where it leads. She's so rich, and there's so many people doing great work around her, people doing shitty, weird work around her too. But I trust yours, mine, and all of you listening, our kind of inner honing device that knows bullshit from the real pure truth. and
mm-hmm.
and so to just like listen to those promptings, explore what resonates with it, and discard the 80% that doesn't. um for me, I very early in my life, at age 14 approximately, certainly by 15, I had connected with a guru, Neem Karoli Baba. And Neem Karoli Baba, for those who are not familiar with him, is Ram Dass's guru, Ram Dass, who wrote the iconic book Be Here Now, and Krishna Das, who is a chant, internationally renowned chant master. Let's see, let's find a better, less patriarchal word for what he does. And artist, chant artist.
Mm,
And so Neem Karoli Baba is his guru too. And so from a very young age, I was hanging out with those guys and resonating so deeply with this particular being, what we call Maharaji. And all these years later, I'll be 60 soon, not that soon, but this year. And he's still my guru. So, and I was given my name Mirabai then by Ramdas at that same time. And when I was a
Oh,
teenager.
wow.
Yeah. So that's a big lineage for me, and it's the thing that I love about this lineage, and you really feel it when you do chanting. And for those of you who are familiar with Krishna Das or Deva Pramal or, Sanatam Kaur, many, many chant artists these days that we can tune into, something changes in our hearts, in our brain chemistry, in our bodies. It's a very embodied practice when we chant the divine names. And it is a bhakti yoga practice, it's a devotional practice. So it's a beautiful one, chanting in any of the spiritual traditions. But this is one that seems to be really accessible and really resonating with a lot of Western people. Is kirtan, is what it's called, right? Kirtan, chanting in the Hindu tradition. It doesn't mean you have to turn into a Hindu, but it means with respect we approach this ancient wisdom tradition and and eat those delicious fruits and allow them to nourish and transform us. Why? So that we can get personally enlightened. Well, that would be nice, but I don't believe in that. I do believe in getting more awake, having our hearts open more. But for me, the primary reason to eat these fruits is so that we can be strong enough to be a source of nourishment in the world, so that we can step up and offer ourselves as you are, Madeline, and so many of you who are listening are doing in your individual lives. We're doing these practices, we're connecting with these ancient wisdom streams so that we can grow a robust soul to meet these times when we are needed.
Mm. Yeah, I'm trying to find this beautiful I was listening to a podcast that you did, an interview that you did earlier today, and you said individual liberation is a meaningless concept to the feminine.
Mm.
And I wrote that down and I was like, I got to bring this up at some point, and right now is the perfect time because
Mhm.
I'm connecting the dots here around. You said that, the vastness, the specificity isn't as desirable because the vast mystery and all the different traditions that are available and all the ways we can create a robust, rich, fruitful life here. um, it makes sense. I mean, I definitely resonate with that a lot because having even a label of I am this inherently is me, and so if your mission here is to be here as a part of the collective and doing this kind of healing work for the world, it goes above and beyond what you identify as for like religion, like in that kind of ways. I hope that I'm explaining it well because
Mhm.
I'm realizing how beautiful that is and how religion often can be a way that we are clinging to something for me and I.
Mhm.
And in some way it's beautiful because it's grounding. It's grounding
Yeah.
and it's respect and it's a path. And I know any monk would say like it takes discipline and it's really of being of meticulous service. And there's something so beautiful about that in a world that is obsessed with Amazon Prime and fast food and go, go, go and swipe culture. That
Yeah.
kind of devotion
Mm.
is remarkable and it's
Yeah.
not found often, but there's a way, and you are a beautiful example of this, that we can have that devotion to the spirit, the great spirit and the many manifestations, and there can still be that form of discipline, but with all of it.
Yes. Discipline, but with all of it, right. It's this path of love is not a fluffy feel good. I mean, it does make me feel wonderful, but it's not about just getting the hit, and leaving the hard stuff. It's a rigorous, demanding path to be able to say yes to the presence of the sacred across the landscape of the spiritual traditions in such a way that, as I said earlier, it really changes us and transforms us. But what I want to clarify, Madeline, is that I'm not saying that picking one path is inherently not good. It's just my temperament seems to be
Mhm.
incapable of doing it because it feels like I'm picking one to the exclusion of all the others that I've fallen in love with. But for many
Hmm.
people, it's really a wonderful choice. And to sink your roots deep into a particular spiritual tradition, like that bhakti yoga tradition of chanting the sacred names and kirtan and having a guru, that's a big part of my path. It's definitely one of my primary paths. And I couldn't imagine life without having deeply connected with that particular wisdom tradition. It's in many ways it's home base, that and Judaism, my ancestral tradition, which my parents rejected, but I
Mm.
reclaimed, is
Hmm.
it's really important to me. The high holy days in the fall are I look forward to it all year long because it's so fucking holy. I feel every cell of my body recalibrated in those 10 days, that what they call the days of awe. It's such a
Hmm.
powerful lineage to be connected to. So don't get me wrong, I am all for deeply connecting with a particular wisdom tradition. And I've had certain contemplative Christian teachers, for instance, tell me, who are in the interspiritual arena like I am, that they feel that their deep Christian contemplative roots make them naturally open to all the other world's wisdom
Mm.
traditions. So a deep Christian can chant a Sufi zikr and not be afraid and feel even more deeply connected to God by doing so. In fact, I think the one person I'm thinking of who told me this said, I've never met anyone who wasn't deeply rooted in their own spiritual tradition that wasn't naturally interspiritual, because it just opens your heart when you're so
Mm.
connected. So there's
Wow.
room for all of us, is what I'm trying to say, and
Hmm.
different times of our lives. So doing, like, going for the chanting in the Hindu tradition right now, whether you're a singer or not, might be exactly the thing that your soul is hungry for, because it opens that devotional heart. But there are many ways to say
Hmm.
yes to those promptings.
I love that you keep bringing up bhakti and chanting because that is, for me, my primary path to feel
Is it?
connected. It
Yay.
is. I have a harmonium on its way
Oh,
because
how
I've decided I want to
exciting.
play on my own. Yeah, because before everything happened with the coronavirus, there's a bhakti center in New York because I actually lived in Brooklyn before I moved here,
Ah,
and every Tuesday and Thursday they held kirtan, and I'd never been before until I
yeah.
moved. And I had a friend who helped run the center, and she just welcomed me in and was like, "Come on Tuesday, I'll introduce you to some cool people. We'll sing." And I'd never done it before, and I went in, and it was just ecstatic
Mm,
joy.
yeah.
Everyone singing and dancing, and people at the end, when the music goes really fast, people are standing up as if they're truly drunk on the divine. Like,
Yeah.
when I imagine, like, Irishmen in a pub and their arms are on their shoulders, and then they're like doing like these kicks together, and they're just jumping all around like super drunk and singing their Irish songs. It like feels like that in
Mm,
a really lively kirtan studio space. Just people get up and their arms are on their shoulders and they're screaming and they're joyful and they're so happy, and it's so liberating and gorgeous. And I had no idea how singing in that way was such a prayer.
yeah.
For me, the only singing I knew was the kind that I grew up on in a massive church with the projectors and the flashing lights. It was called
Mm.
Six Flags Over Jesus, the church
Oh,
that I
wow.
went to. And
Oh, wow.
it was it was more going to church was more of punishment, and that's kind of how God was used in my life, is
Mm,
reward and punishment. God loves you for this, doesn't love you for this. And so I had a very confusing relationship with God for so many years, as well as singing. I hated singing. I hated
mm,
it. I hated the songs. And even
yeah.
when I think about, I have a very deep nervous system response when I even think about Christian singing and hymns, which one
Mm,
day will hopefully be healed. But it was so nourishing for me to find this kind of chanting, a kind of
mm,
chanting I wasn't allowed to do when I was a kid. I wasn't allowed to say Om. I wasn't allowed to hug a tree. I
Yeah.
wasn't allowed to have a peace sign in my life. Or with my fingers, there's so many things I wasn't allowed to do because that's where the devil lived. And like,
Wow.
there's so much in there. And of course, like where I feel the most expression and expansion is with nature. It's with the tree. It's with peace. It's with love. It's many of the Hindu deities have been really quite healing for me to observe with respect. I really
Mhm.
love that we're bringing in this respect piece, because it's not about owning and claiming and mine. It's about seeing and respecting and bowing and praying. And um, I'm just really, I also want to just point out the last part you said there about anchoring in something gives you that freedom to welcome in all. And I think that's more of what I'm craving, is anchoring in one of them, and having, then it brings me more spaciousness with all the rest.
I think that is what you're craving, and I would trust that. I trust that in you, and I hope you trust that in yourself. All of you who are
Hmm.
feeling what Madeline's feeling, because I know that so many of us resonate with each other. When these things arise in one of us, they're often arising in many of us.
Mm, yeah. So I have another question for you around your
Mhm,
relationship to the divine, to the beloved.
mhm,
Do you see the beloved as, like, in Bhakti, it talks about like the 7 different ways that we relate to other, as if it's student to guru, if it's uh this to this to this. I can't remember any of the other ones besides lover to lover.
mhm,
And I'm curious if your relationship with the divine feels like husband a bit, feels like lover,
mhm,
feels like partner in shine. Do you have that
mhm,
element in your, and not only just the student to the big teacher of all teachers,
mhm.
but lover?
Yeah, I mean, I do. And I've written a lot about this and spoken a lot about this in my work, that because I started off my spiritual path being named Mirabai, and Mirabai was a 16th century saint in India who was a poet, an ecstatic love poet, who was in love with Krishna, the god of love. And I
Mm.
received that name because I played the role of Mirabai in a school musical that we wrote based on a comic book from India about the life of Mirabai, and another comic book about Krishna, the deity, the blue-skinned flute-playing god of love. And and when I performed in this play, it was actually the end of my 13th year. I was about to turn 14. My first love, my boyfriend, Philip, had just been killed in a gun accident,
Mm.
um, shooting at coyotes who were chasing their family's chickens here in northern New Mexico, the outback, what do we call it? The Wild West. And so I was completely shattered by this death of my first love, my beloved. And so that hooked me right into this Mirabai thing. When I played the role of Mirabai, I felt inhabited by this being from 500 years ago, who had given up everything, given up a life of privilege, actually, wealth and privilege, to just throw off her sandals and travel around northern India playing her one-stringed instrument, the ektara, and singing these spontaneous love songs to Krishna. So this is my this is my lineage,
Mm.
is to see the divine as beloved, as lover, and it's intermingled longing and ecstasy, because it's the fire of longing, the burning yearning for the one who is just out of our grasp, who touched us and then disappeared, setting us on fire. And it's also these moments of rapture when
Mm.
we melt into that which we long for, and there's no longer any separation.
Mm.
And so my whole spiritual life is this kind of dance between longing and communion. And the communion has become more and more quiet and less dramatic. So it's also enabled me to have a human relationship with a human dude my husband that feels healthy and grounded and free of those kind of supernatural expectations that I used to foist upon my human lovers, being Mirabai, in love with Krishna, and they never measured up.
Yeah. So now I'm assuming that when you feel earthly longing,
Mhm.
when you're longing for your husband when he's on a trip, or you're longing for him to say one extra I love you, do you feel that like, do you have almost like a nervous system response where you just now know, like, it's an ethereal longing too, like your earthly longing is really an ethereal longing for the divine?
Maybe so. That's a really good question. What I will tell you is I almost never resent him or feel like he's not giving me what I want.
Wow.
I think there are 2 reasons for that. One is he's an incredibly good guy who is really loving and devotional and also very strong and solid, you know? He's like a great tree under which I take shelter.
Hmm.
Um, so he's very good at being a partner, but I think it's also because I feel so held by my divine beloved that I don't need that. It frees me. My relationship with the divine frees me to not put that on Gangadas, my husband. But it took me a few practice relationships, including a temporary husband, before I
Yeah.
found this. And so I think it's a combination of the work he did on himself, and the work I did on myself, and just the maturing of my spiritual life. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. I know that's going to resonate so deeply with my listeners because the longing is so real. You know,
Yeah.
for all sensitive feminine beings, the longing is so real. And I think it's one of the things that as women living in this patriarchal society, have been the hardest on ourselves for. Because
Mhm.
longing is just like, if we're not trained how to be with our longing, then yeah, we end up projecting it onto our partners. And then if they don't know what's going on either, I think there's projection back. And then so many women feel like they're crazy for
Mhm.
wanting more. But as one of my teachers, John Wineland, says, that all women, all feminine beings, I'll say, have a bottomless pit for something. Like there,
Mhm.
it's never enough for something, which is what's so magical about us, is that we're
Mhm.
so like more
Mhm.
love, more this, more devotion, more ecstasy. And so the longing, there's also like a bottomless pit of longing, which can feel so tender and sad and hard if we don't have an understanding of what it's there for and how we can
Mhm.
tend to it. And these practices of having a lover to lover connection with the divine, and having ritual, and having just having a knowing that your longing is for a bigger longing,
Mhm.
is such a exquisite and powerful gift to have that kind of wisdom and knowledge going, oh, that's my heart craving the divine to fill me. That's what that is. And it's not crazy and it's not needy.
Yeah.
It's into me. It's my sensitivity. It's how I stay devoted.
I'm so glad you're saying this because one of my sayings that I hear coming out of my mouth a lot is let's reclaim longing.
Mm.
It's been vilified, for all the reasons you're saying. And I guess the only other thing I want to say about that is it's not like um the longing for God is higher than the desire for our physical partners. They're a little bit different, but they're both holy for me.
Mm. Yeah. I love that word holy. It's such a great word. It's so beautiful. So as we come up here, I could talk to you forever, forever. But as we come up on our time here, I just had a little, hopefully a brief question for you, and I want to know which feminine mystic feels the most present in your life right now.
Hmm. I for years it's been Teresa of Avila, Santa Teresa de Avila, also 16th century saint from Spain, who was a crypto Jew, a hidden Jew, who
Mm.
was forced, her family was forced to convert during the Inquisition, conversos. And I've translated her from Spanish to English. Spanish is my second language, and she has been a tia for me, an auntie, a guide, a best friend. And I feel like in many ways she's, I think I even said it in Wild Mercy, like the matron saint of that book, because all my investigations of the women mystics and sages, contemporary and historic and ancient, it's like she's the one holding my hand as I do that. She's also the one who held my hand when my daughter died. My 14-year-old
Mm.
daughter Jenny was killed in a car accident just after my first book came out, which happened to have been a translation of Dark Night of the Soul by John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila's protege, let's call him. And I just signed a contract to translate the interior castle. And she saved my life. During that time, she helped me bear the unbearable. And so I think in many ways, I can't shake that primary connection with her. She's still my girl. She's still the one that walks with me. And she's so rich and fruitful for these times. Like, she was feisty, she was irreverent, she was deeply devoted, she was gregarious and outgoing and inappropriate, and also cultivated this stillness that you can taste when you mm,
Mm.
meet her through her books. But see, the thing for me about books is they're just like conduits for the real thing, or not. Some of them are not, but some of them are.
Mm.
So it's like you can say to people, well, you can't get it from a book, but you can. Something can happen, some transmission. Well, you expressed it with Wild Mercy. A transmission can come through the written word that then is beyond the written word. And that's how St. Teresa is for me, and how I want her to speak to everyone, because she's so amazing.
Mm, mm. I hadn't heard of her until I read your book, and it's on my list to get the translation that you wrote, because I'm very intrigued by her and
Mm,
all that you share about how she's alchemized something within you, and you just can't shake her. It's really
yeah.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And you have an audiobook coming out of Wild
Yes.
Mercy. So can you tell us more about that?
Oh, thank you for asking, Madeline. So, yes, on January 26th, and I don't know when you're going to be listening to this, those of you who are listening, but so it may already have happened. Wild Mercy audio is coming out. I narrated it in my own voice, and it was one of the most profound experiences of my life, was recording this book. Hard to explain what happened for me. It was as if I hadn't read it and I was receiving it. And I love reading. I love reading aloud. Grew up without television and lots of siblings and friends, and I was always the designated reader. And and so the music of the language really comes through, I think, in this recording. It's I'm super excited about it, and many people are listening to audiobooks now. It's really a blossoming way to connect. So I hope that you will get your hands on it. It's not expensive.
Oh, great. I will make sure I have the link to that in the show notes for this. And
Thank
I
you.
so agree. My favorite, I love listening to, this is kind of a memoir in some ways, but like
Yeah.
I love listening, especially when the author reads it herself. It's
Mm,
just really nourishing to my soul to hear it. So this, out of all the books that I read last year, this is the book. So
mm.
everyone listening to this, you must get it, whether you get the audiobook or you get the hard copy or you get both. So I'll make sure I have the links for that. And is there anything
Thank
else
you.
coming up that you want everyone to know about, or where they can find you and where they
Yeah,
can find you?
thank you. My website, mirabaistar.com. or just Google me, and you'll find lots of things in this COVIDian age, as somebody said, I forgot who. It's where I'm meeting with people is online, primarily on Zoom. So yeah, feel free to check out the events page of my website. There are a lot of things coming up.
Beautiful. Again, I'll have those links on there. Y'all can just easily
Thank
click
you.
that in the show notes. Mirabai, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I could truly talk to you for just days and days and days, which just probably means at some point maybe we can do a part two.
Hmm.
But thank you so much for your wisdom and your writing and your presence with your presence with us today. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Madeline. It's been such a joy to be with you. Great questions, and also just to connect with you. You're
Mm.
definitely my heart sister.
Ah, thank you. I feel the same way. So, everyone, you can go to maddiemoon.com/Mirabai Star, and that's with two R's to get the show notes for this. This is episode 330 of the Mind Body Musings podcast. We hope you enjoyed this. You can let us know your thoughts on Instagram or on the show notes. Otherwise, we will see you next week for another episode of the Mind Body Musings podcast.